FlyFox.
Like a boat out of the blue, fate steps in and sees you through.
White bread,
One
2 pieces.
upon a star, your dreams come true.
Pretty, huh? I'll bet a lot of you folks don't believe that. About a wish coming true, do you?
Disney started out their feature film canon with a bang. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was a critical and commercial success, and it propelled Walt Disney and his company into stardom. In my review of Snow White, I stated that the movie didn't live up to my expectations. My lack of nostalgia towards Snow White gave me the opportunity to see it from a different perspective than most people. I admire the technical and animation achievement of Snow White, but the movie doesn't hold my interest enough in order to let me love it. Where the script was the weak part of Snow White, Disney's second feature film, Pinocchio, doesn't have that problem. Its script is near perfect. Where Snow White lacked in themes and character development, Pinocchio excels. Where Snow White mixed animation with the technique of traditional film, Pinocchio blurs the line into something only animation can accomplish. Pinocchio is a masterpiece. Plain and simple, it is one of the greatest animated movies ever made.
As I live and breathe.
Disney has almost always adapted their stories from pre-existing properties, shaping and molding classic stories into something that can only be described as Disney-esque. The Adventures of Pinocchio was originally written by Carlo Collodi, an Italian author, as an allegory for Italian society. So when Disney adapted the story for their second feature, they kept many of the allegorical references and scenes, and whether intentional or not, Pinocchio has been historically viewed as a film about morals and religion.
Why, he's a natural-born actor. Take it in.
But I'm going
Straight to the top. Why, I be back in the morning.
Pinocchio excels in everything that makes classic Disney great. Wonderful character design, memorable songs, and innovative filmmaking. As Walt Disney told us in my Snow White review, Disney had developed the multiplane camera, allowing the Disney filmmakers to simulate depth by moving different planes closer to or further away from the camera. In Snow White, Disney mostly used this technique to create a realistic world, but in Pinocchio, the animators moved past simply simulating the real world into making a world that only animation can achieve. In a time before digital technology made special effects commonplace, Pinocchio had long, impossible shots, giant spectacle, and quiet, sinister moments of pure doom and gloom. In fact, there are sequences within Pinocchio that are so elaborate that the animators moved beyond the multiplane camera, especially this scene. The camera pans over, zooms in, pans again, zooms some more, and then finally lands on Geppetto's toy shop. This scene was so elaborate that it has been estimated to have cost $48,000, a crazy amount when considering that the scene itself is only a few seconds long, and it was made in the late 1930s. Pinocchio was so successful in its artistic endeavors that it led Disney historian and film critic Leonard Maltin to say, "With Pinocchio, Disney reached not only the high point of his powers, but also the apex of what many consider to be the realm of the animated cartoon." But what exactly is it about Pinocchio that makes it work so well? If technical achievement is what makes a film great, then why don't I love Snow White? I think that the reason Pinocchio excels is its clear use of a simple story with complex themes. Children's movies are often derided as fluff or anti-intellectual, but actually I think that the distilling of themes into something simple and straightforward, such as in Pinocchio, can actually challenge a viewer to react more than if the film was more subtle. A children's film about sin, temptation, forgiveness, and compassion is something we see a lot these days. Almost every children's film has some element of these themes running through them. but they are rarely as forceful and as devastating as in Pinocchio. While this film isn't a straightforward Christian allegory, I can't help but see the parallels. Pinocchio rebels almost instantaneously against what he has been told to do. He willingly finds himself falling into one sinful trap after another. Things like pride and debauchery come quickly to him. When Pinocchio's choices begin to impact him physically, manifesting in donkey ears and a tail, we see just where his jackassery has led him. So blunt, so perfect. No other Disney film comes close to this level of raw moralism. The jackasses are even sold off as workers, emphasizing the nature of being enslaved to sin and vice. If we were left at that point, we might find this film leading us into a pit of despair so deep that we might never return. But ultimately, Pinocchio sees exactly how hopeless that life of sin really is, and then after all of his mistakes, he seeks to return to his maker.
Pinocchio, my boy, I'm so happy to see you.
Me too, Father.
This seems very similar to the story of the Prodigal Son in the Bible. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father." The themes of sin, forgiveness, and grace that are found in Pinocchio cannot be separated from what is the foundational narrative of Western civilization. But the Christian allegory isn't perfect. In the movie, Pinocchio is both sinner and savior. Although humans are sinners, Jesus was completely perfect and is the only savior. And unlike Pinocchio's journey to salvation through his own works, the only way to true salvation is through faith in Jesus Christ. Pinocchio is among the best animated films ever made. The story is miles beyond the simplicity of Snow White, and the animation was pushed forward into a new level of sophistication. Pinocchio is a great film and one of my favorite Disney films, and it deserves to be seen again and again.
What you crying for?
Because you're dead, Pinocchio.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. Now lie down.
But Father, I'm alive, see? And I'm real. I'm a real boy.
Explosion! Fly Fox!